Hi guys, today I wanted to talk about why life should never have to be hard, except for external things that make life hard. Like, you don't have to put yourself in hard situations. Your life doesn't have to be a struggle and struggle life and starting from the bottom and that whole struggle mindset is just so bad. And may I just be very clear, I'm not addressing people that have had a shit hand dealt to them in life, or people that are chronically ill or have had things happen that are out of their control. That's what I mean by external. However, I do not like the mindset that do you know where this stems from? This stems from when older people tell our generation how easy we have it all the time and how hard life was for them as an excuse to belittle our struggles, because they view our struggles as minute compared to what they went through. And the point that I'm trying to make is that while struggle is inherently a part of life, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to put yourself in the position of struggle to make life worth it. Does that make sense? I really hope so. I feel like a lot of times older people will be like, we had it so hard, and think that we're not living because they're like, everything's so easy nowadays. And I can understand how sometimes something being hard and then paying off is really rewarding, and how instant gratification is such a downside of our generation. Everything's expected instantly, everything is catered to us and for us, perfectly curated, sell us things, we buy things, consumerism, food at your doorstep. No one knows how to make a fucking loaf of bread anymore. However, they'll always tell you about these oh well, we had this trouble and that trouble, and it was so bad and I had to do things that I didn't want to do, and with boundaries, and I understand that, obviously, if you've never been, if you've grown up your whole life never knowing that it's okay to set boundaries, that might, to your, I was going to say immune system, to your, brain programming, setting boundaries may seem avoidant, or when these older people are all these kids with ARFID, or people that are autistic or ADHD, or it's just an excuse to stop you from having to deal with real life struggles. You just have to get on with things sometimes. No, you don't. And I'm so sorry that you had to live that type of life, and you should probably heal. And I think this is the thing, is we don't have to live in this state of I've been through shit. Obviously everyone goes through shit, I understand that, but we can heal from that. You don't have to take that I don't know, and it sounds so silly and obvious, but it's a really little thing that I feel isn't really discussed overly. I've deleted TikTok because it was rotting my brain, and maybe it is being discussed right now, but from what I was seeing at the time, it wasn't being discussed. Or maybe I saw it being discussed once, where I was this I think it probably was a girl, but she was saying something about we shouldn't have to struggle, we are put on this earth to exist. Apparently there's two religious bases, and it's, I don't know if it's split into Eastern and Western, I'm not 100% sure, but it's basically that one set of religions is about making something for your life and doing well for yourself and like learning to be better or be the best version of you, be the best that you can be, and growing. And the other type is about just existing and embracing and like taking things as they come. And I feel like it's funny because people preach religion and they preach that. I was about to make a really confident statement that probably would have got me in a lot of trouble, so I'm not going to make that statement. I'll tell you what the statement is, because it's not that deep, but like, I have not read any religious text thoroughly enough to know this, but I was going to say, in nowhere in any religious text does it say that suffering is necessary, but it probably does actually, because that sounds like quite like a Puritan statement. So I probably actually don't know what I'm talking about, but I find a lot of what I've seen about religious teachings, it says that suffering helps you learn things and, you know, helps you know when not to do things again. But I think from everything that I've read, and again, if I'm wrong, I'm really sorry, but this is just the gist of what I've picked up, is that it's not essential. You don't have to. Like, and so if you don't have to, why do we choose to? Aside from, obviously, I'm just going to repeat it every time because I don't want someone to like cut in at a random point and think I'm being a horrible person, but aside from suffering that is out of our control, obvious suffering, why do we put ourselves through all the unnecessary stressors that could be avoided, such as botched communication or not being able to set a boundary or staying in uncomfortable relationships through fear of growth or putting ourselves in dangerous situations at someone else's expense, all things that like violate us honouring ourselves. I find these are often the things that old people talk about when they speak about how, or it was just the way things were. And I can understand that. And it's so great that we're so progressive now, that we have the knowledge to be able to think the way that we can for ourselves. And, you know, we can actually do these things without being like, I don't know, burned at the stake. But like, I feel like maybe actually I have my answer. Up until now, I had a viewpoint on this that wasn't like, it was like quite biased. But I guess maybe the societal pressures of previous generations, they didn't know how not to suffer because it was so normalized that maybe they didn't even see it as suffering. Like, maybe they didn't look at themselves and think like, I am suffering or I am struggling. And I've thought this quite often in my life, is that this is why many people get to 40 and 50 and have this like huge nervous breakdown, because they get halfway through their life and they start seeing it's funny because the way I see it is like a spiritual awakening. Like, you literally like start thinking to yourself, what the fuck am I doing? Who am I? What have I done with my life? Where am I going with my life? Like, it's literally a spiritual awakening in its purest form is an existential crisis. It's just like, if you ever like switch on, like my spiritual awakening was kind of paranormally, so it kind of led me down that road anyway. But I feel like a spiritual awakening can be so many different things. It doesn't have to take that route or be that way. It can just be tapping into that understanding of like, why have I made these choices up until now, and are they honouring who I am? And I think maybe initially I was being a bit harsh at the start of this podcast on the older generations that maybe didn't have like the tools or the understanding to be able to come to that realization, because I think that's one thing that our generation are really, really fortunate to have, is the understanding of, you know, of these concepts. Even I speak to my mum at times, and I think I tell her about things like projection or people pleasing, and setting boundaries is like a huge thing. Like, my mum's recently left her job, and like, she has retired now, and she was experiencing like really, it was funny because I'm like super holistic in the way I view medicine. I obviously think that Western medicine has a place and is really, really important. And I also try not to cross science and spirituality, because I think you're entering kind of murky waters there, and things that like I'm not too well versed in. But if you don't know what like psychosomatic pain is, basically it's like kind of like pain that's in your head. But there's this thing called somatic therapy that is basically like a form of therapy, and it uses like different parts of your body as indicators of like trauma points where pain is stored in your body. And it was really interesting because my mum like sat me down like a few weeks ago, and basically was like, I am having a really intense pain frequently, and like I don't know what to do, like it is so bad. Anyway, so she like went to the doctors and everything, like everything came back clear, like everything, she was fine, like there is nothing wrong with her. But at the same time, I started looking into psychosomatic like pain, and there's a map. If you type in like, I think it's called like somatic therapy map or like somatic map or something, it basically puts like a map of the human body, and then the points where you're experiencing pain and what they correlate to. And it was funny because all the places that she was experiencing pain, all of the things that they correlated to were issues that she'd spoken to me about things that she went through in her childhood that she had never addressed or dealt with before. So to me, as like someone who views things spiritually, if you don't, you may see this differently, but that was a clear indication to me that she had like severe heavy blocked trauma, and her staying in this workplace was bringing it out of her physically, or like it was demanding to be addressed. And it's really funny because I feel like a lot of these older people that obviously, you know, old people have so many more experiences and skills and, you know, life than someone like, say, my age. And I notice how each year I change so rapidly, but I feel one thing that I've had the ability to do that maybe the older generations haven't is deal with things as I go, or like have the awareness of trauma. And a lot of people around me also have that awareness as well. Like, it's even sort of like a social media, like internet meme, like trend thing of like, what's your trauma, like trauma dumping, you know, that's like slang speak on it, like, I was gonna say Instagram, maybe more like TikTok, but that's literally doesn't matter. But I feel like it's interesting because we are so aware of like, well, I say we, some people are, some people aren't, but I think for the most part it's less taboo now in these days to be like, oh, you know, like I'm having a mentee B, like you would say that as, you know, a joke and mean it. But in the olden days, like if you were to say to someone, I've had a mental breakdown, they're like, whoa, like that's a big thing. Like obviously, and mental health was so taboo, especially for men. And why did I just like slip into an American accent? That was so weird. It was like out of my control as well. Maybe I'm inherently American. I've been thinking recently that I could be like a valley boy. Like I really feel like that's like my true calling. Like I want to like grow my own like weed strain and like wear like baseball caps and like sit on Laguna Beach. I think that's what they do. And like go to a frat party as a man though, obviously. It'd be so scary going as a woman. Anyway, I can't really remember what I was saying. Damn. I think it was just something about being able to deal with things as I go or something along those lines. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like if you're not able to process things as you go, they culminate inside of you and they build up, and over time cause these like blockages within you. And it's funny how I went into this podcast with like one mindset, and I've literally like talked to myself out of that mindset. But this is why I like podcasting, because, you know, if you agreed with me initially or not, you may or may not have changed your mind now. You may agree with me now, you may not. But I feel like, obviously I still stick by my original point that we don't have to struggle, but I feel like initially it was like, well, to me it always has been a generational thing. Like, you know, old people will say like, oh, you have it so hard. Like that is just no, they'll say, oh, we had it so hard. Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry, I'm really tired and it's really late and I'm like not speaking properly, but so that is, you know, my experience. And obviously I guess I don't have their experience to be able to comment on whether or not it is psychosomatic or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But that's obviously just the way that it's been presented to me during my life. But I think upon deeper like reflection of it, it's like, have we had to teach ourselves to heal ourselves, or is that something we just inherently know? Like, side chat, but I saw this video on Instagram ages ago, and it was this boy, and like, he was really young, and it was like, you know when like little kids cry and they start like smacking their faces and like shaking their bodies and like jumping up and down, like moving around. She basically said that is our inherent way of being able to understand how to like clear energy from our like auric field, like literally to like shake it out of us. And obviously we get scolded for that, because to, you know, modern society that is like unacceptable behavior. Like that's called throwing a tantrum. So we've effectively demonized the correct way to heal ourselves. And I don't know when this began, maybe at the introduction of etiquette, or I don't know when society began. But basically the girl's point was that like if an animal gets chased by a predator, it will run, and like if it survives, it will sit and violently shake for like 20 minutes, and that is its way of like shaking out the fear. And like that's why animals are so good at just like, apart from like, actually, again, I'm so not well versed enough in the animal kingdom to know this. I feel like I keep going to make really blanket statements and then realising that like I actually don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But like, I mean, apart from what I see, you don't really see animals like scrapping for no reason and it becoming like a big thing. Like they'll have like a little tiff, like, you know, cats will just be like meow and like attack each other and then it's done. Like, you don't see animals exhibiting that behaviour of like, do you know when you slowly begin to like hate someone? Like, has anyone ever experienced that? Like, it sort of creeps up at first and then you're like, you're annoying me. Like everything that they do, it's like once you see it, you can't not see it. And then it's just like,
If you know what LYLAS stands for, then this podcast is definitely for you. Two besties since middle school turned moms and psychologists chat the good, the fun, and the yucks of life.
We're tackling all things mental health, from our own personal self-esteem to losses like friendships and parents, as well as addiction. Many things us midlife mamas are going through, from our own personal experiences with our added professional flair.
We hope each week our listeners feel like they just left a good old therapy session with their bestie. We'll dish tips and tricks to help keep your mental wellness in check and hopefully make you giggle a time or two.
Be sure to check us out each Monday and meet your life's newest cheerleaders, Sarah and Jen with the LYLAS podcast.
And then it becomes like, you know, the arguments tend to happen more. And then, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, that process when you're like, you just begin to dislike someone. You may know them, or you may, this can happen in the span of like a year, or this can happen in the span of a minute. This could be just someone you meet on the street. And like, you know, as humans, it becomes this huge thing. And I don't know if it's because we have like a developed language, and the language that we use carries such strong meaning. And because, you know, animals, maybe they do, I don't know, I don't speak any animal language, nor do I know if they actually have like a developed language, or if it's just sounds. Like, is it something that we don't understand, or is it just sounds? But if they could do that, would animal gossip be a thing? Or are they just so healed because they actually know how to like intuitively heal their own like traumas, that they don't have to do shit like that? Or are they doing shit like that and we just don't know about it, and I'm just like being a dumbass and like not aware of those behaviours? I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, and I think about it quite often because I wonder like what future generations are going to be like, because I think initially there was such a pushback on like gentle parenting. But think about it, there was a time where there was a pushback on corporal punishments, and now it's kind of like just very frowned upon to hit your child. Like, obviously I know some people may think otherwise, and like they can have their reasons for that. I don't agree with it, but some people obviously do still agree with like corporal punishment. But, you know, there was a time where teachers could hit students. Like, I'm pretty sure like my mum was hit, and she went to school, she was taught by nuns. Like, she went to like some like a really, really Catholic school, and she was taught by nuns, and they used to hit her with like rulers and rubbers and like pencil, I don't fucking know, but yeah, crazy to me. Like, that's crazy to me, and it's so like normalized. And they'd just be like, you don't know how easy you have it, and I'd be like, no, that's like a them problem. Like, are you okay? Like, you should probably get some therapy. Like, to us, that's like, you should probably get some therapy, but like back in the day, that was just like standard behaviour. So like, and I've always thought this as well, like, side note, is it that the behaviour affects us more because we're more sensitive to it? Or has it always had the same implications? It's just, you know, explains bad behaviour. Like, are people more or less violent than they used to be? Like, I'm sure there's published statistics out on like violence levels, and, you know, I can look at like crime rates and all that if I'm really interested. But this is more like a conversation, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I should start making like video essays. But I feel like it's really interesting, like, because to me, it's like the abused becomes the abuser unless they heal. Because I've seen this in people that I've known throughout my life where they've had a poor relationship with, say, you know, their mum or their dad, but they've grown up to be just like them because they're so like kind of out of touch with those behaviours, like those behaviours that are so normalised for them and that they grew up with are actually so like uncomfortable for other people. So I'll give you an example. Like, if you have a friend who's grown up in an environment where shouting is really like, it's like normal to shout at someone, they're going to be so much more prone to like shout at their friends if they're in an emotionally reactive state than someone who didn't grow up in that environment. Like, I'm trying to think of an example that I've had. Okay, so, like, my mum is, like, who I've basically, like, modelled my whole personality off of, because she's, like, my, one, like, my main role model, and two, she's just, like, the woman, like, figure in my life, you know? And she is, like, super communicative about everything, unless it makes her uncomfortable, and then she literally can't say a word. And I, even without trying, and it's funny because obviously I'm self-aware and I'm, like, working on it, but, like, inherently I am exactly that. And, like, I've had to work on saying when I'm uncomfortable about something, and, like, if it's a topic, like, if it's any, like, topic that doesn't really, like, trigger something within me, I'm like, yeah, I can talk about it, fine. But if it makes me feel, like, uncomfortable, I really struggle to get it out, and that's something that I've really worked on. And I've noticed such a big difference in, like, how comfortable I feel within myself, that I've learned to, like, undo that trait, even though it's come from someone who is a great role model, and doesn't mean, like, it's funny, I was having a chat with my mum the other day, and she was, like, basically saying that she used to be fake because she thought it was easier than having an uncomfortable conversation with someone. Because I was saying I get confused about how people say things, like, say one thing to someone and then another thing to someone else, and, like, continue to hang out with someone that they, like, blatantly don't like. Like, to me, that's, like, really weird behaviour, and I don't understand it. And my mum was like, well, yeah, but to me, that makes so, like, if it's someone that you're going to see anyway, it makes it so much easier to just keep the peace, even if it makes you feel horrible. And I was like, why would you do that to yourself? And she's like, we don't all have the confidence that you have. Like, that's uncomfortable, like, that would be really uncomfortable and make me really stressed to do that. And I was like, but I don't understand, because I'm not looking for, like, an issue. And she was like, I know, but a lot of people wouldn't know how to do that without, like, looking like it was causing an issue. And, like, it's things like that where I think older generations didn't know how to take up space or do things in a way that was, like, you know, I don't know how to explain it other than to say, like, you know, there's that thing that people say online a lot where it's like, it's not my responsibility to understand or, like, pander to your triggers. Because I had a similar experience where, so I'm going on holiday, and I have, like, a bit of a thing about holidays, because I've been on a few holidays that have been, like, really, like, kind of traumatic, and, like, being in a foreign country and being scared is really, like, not ideal, obviously, for obvious reasons. And I've got a holiday coming up, and I noticed that it was bringing up a lot of these, like, feelings within me. And I was speaking to Joe, and I was like, I'm feeling really, like, nervous about this, and, like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, can you let me know what some of your triggers are so that I can, like, you know, whatever. And I was like, no, I can't. I can give you the list that we've addressed so far. However, it's not your responsibility to walk on eggshells around me so that I'm comfortable. Like, what it is, it's my responsibility to address the fact that I'm having this reaction emotionally. And anytime something comes up, communicate that as and when in a calm state. Like, I can, you know, it's okay to be emotionally reactive and for emotional states to not sometimes be what people expect, but not in the sense of obviously, like, taking things out on people. But I think that's one thing that is so hard to do for a lot of people, is when you're feeling an emotion, convey it in a way that is calm. And, like, instead of getting, like, heated or something, because initially I was getting a little heated, and I was like, I don't like this, like, it's not, I don't want, you know, I've obviously addressed that this is a problem for me, but you should be able to effectively, like, do what you want and say what you want. Because I've had that before where I feel like someone needs constant pandering to, and it gets jarring. Like, as much as, like, obviously, you know, people go through shit, have you ever been around someone where you try really hard and you still end up saying the wrong thing, and then they just jump down your throat and you're just like... And I've probably been that person myself, like back when, you know, I was like super unhealed. But like it's a really uncomfortable place to be for the person that is like makes the accident, because you don't know, you know, what is going to trigger someone and what isn't. And I've said this like a million times before, but like something could trigger me that would not trigger another person. So is it that person's fault, or is it, you know, unless it's like obviously inherently they've like gone for, like they've made it personal, that's completely different. But it's like not okay to just expect people. And I think this is the mindset that the older generations have, is that they think like, you know, not everyone can pander to you because they didn't grow up in that world where everything is catered to them and fits them and their niche and their corner, their little corner of the world. Like, I think that's why they maybe get frustrated with our generation, and I can understand that, is that they didn't, you know, one, have the ability to set the record straight and say like, I'm not going to accept that. They didn't have the ability to do that because the consequences would have been like really, you know, bad, or just like not possible for them. Or two, they didn't understand how to. They probably really struggle, you know, seeing it from this modern day perspective. And it makes sense to me why, you know, sometimes our generation is viewed as snowflakes, especially if we're not aware of what we are doing. Because obviously, you know, self-awareness isn't always what you think it is. Like sometimes you can think yourself aware, like you can think yourself aware, but it's actually your ego. Does that make sense? Like, you'll be so convinced that you're thinking about something so and I find this a lot, like in like media will humble me. I don't know if anyone else has this, like that's kind of switched on to, or like accept signs as like part of their reality. But like for me, I accept signs from media heavily. I find that a lot of the way that spirit communicates with me is through the senses and media. So like speech, or like music, TV, radio, any kind of like visual stimulant can like be a part of that as well. But like, you know how a lot of people say it's through nature? Mine is not. Mine is through media. Obviously some of it is through nature, like everything is nature inherently, but mine is a lot of media anyway. And like recently I've been watching this series called One Day, and you've probably seen it. If you haven't, it's insane and you really need to watch it. And it's really funny because the main guy in it, like I'm not like very foreign, so I'm only speaking up until like episode 5 of his story. I don't really know much, but like I relate to him so heavily on like, if you don't know, I'm not going to spoil it, but he really struggles on like knowing what to do with his life. And I know the other girl, Emma, struggles as well, but she has more stability and structure than him. And, you know, he's quite careless, and like I can be quite careless, and like, you know, just in the sense of doing something that looks great on a CV but is not fulfilling. And like, where do you go from there? And I think watching this series, to me, is like to me it's like a message. It's just the way I take it. You don't have to agree with this, because I know it could sound kind of like hippy dippy, but to me that is like a message that other people, like, this is a story that has happened so many times before, and like, you don't need to worry. This is actually so common of a thing that it's a trope in a series. Like, like, I don't know why, but recently I've been having this thing where, like, anytime I get worried about something, I literally think to myself, you are not that special. Like, you are not the only person that's ever experienced this. Like, obviously, that doesn't, I'm not trying to, like, minimise what I'm going through, but, and I don't mean it in, like, a harsh way or, like, a tough love way. I don't mean it like that, but what I mean is, like, look at it in the fact that so many other people have gone through and, you know, gotten through what you are currently going through, and at the end of their life they'll probably have forgotten that it even happened. Like, think about how many times something's been so bad in your life and someone said, will this matter in a year? And you're like, no. Does it matter now? No. Like, I think about the struggles that I had in my life a year ago, and now, even if those same struggles happened, they wouldn't have the same outcome because the people I have in my life are different, or they've grown, the people that were in my life then have grown up and understand different viewpoints now, or the way that it was as an issue before would not be able to interact or interfere with my current reality. And it's like, that's something really nice to be able to hold on to, is that you can just, like, let it go and just, like, exist, because you know that everyone else has been through this as well. Like, you know, that whole TikTok trend of, like, have I actually ever had an original experience? The whole point, like, to me, the whole point of, like, spirit and, you know, consciousness or whatever is that we're all part of the same thing, experiencing life through every different way absolutely possible, as every person, every plant, everything, every, like, you know, anything that is living is a part of that consciousness. And, you know, you can tap into it and, like, draw knowledge and power from it, but like, inherently on this earth we are put here to learn how to be conscious and how to just, like, take things in and live the experience and learn from the experience. And, you know, you can draw power from the big, I see it as like a big ball. I don't know, in my head it's just a big ball, and we're all like a little tiny little small fragment of this big ball. But we just have to experience our own little section. And the reason that everyone has such similar experiences to us is because there's so much to experience. And, you know, there is no way that two people have, you know, the furthest two people that live in the furthest corners of life, you know, one could be a refugee and the other could be a movie star, and they both probably still have bad days about the same things. And don't get me wrong, they have different coping mechanisms and they have different tools to be able to help them, and they have different people surrounding them that they can talk to, but inherently the experience of the feeling and, you know, dealing with that is the same, but we get to experience it through, every single person gets to experience the same emotion in a completely different way. And I think that is so, like, cool. I know that sounds like I'm trying to be really profound, and I don't mean it like that, but I just think it's really comforting to know that no matter wherever you are, someone is probably experiencing the same uncomfortable feelings as you, and you have to wonder how they're handling it. And it's funny because I like spend a lot of time on, like, Reddit, and, like, that's a lie. Lewis spends a lot of time on Reddit while I watch his phone, but I sometimes spend time on Reddit, and I sometimes even write Reddit posts when I need help about things. And it's funny because everyone will give you a different answer to the same question. Like, everyone's reply will be so different. Obviously there will be some similarities, but people have a different coping mechanism, a different life hack, a different little skill to handle things. And, you know, it's just like finding the ones that work for you. And I just think that's really like a nice part about life is that we all experience similar things in such drastically different ways. And like, you know, not one is better or worse than the other. It's just the experience. Anyway, I don't know why my brain's just shut off now. I feel like that was quite well rounded off though, but happy 40 minutes. I don't really remember the last time I made a podcast this long. I really enjoyed that though. And I'm going to go to sleep now. Good night.